Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thanks for stopping by again. Tonight I'm going to be bringing you up to date on what's going on with the coronavirus and everything else here. We are continuing to make substantial progress, and we are now definitely in a second phase. And then I'll talk for a moment about your coming down, if that's what you're planning to do, in the not too distant future. To begin with, 2-3 days ago, there was a rather strong statement in one of the newspapers accusing a contract, a major contract, part of the whole medical emergency business, as being inappropriate, wrong, corrupt, whatever. And it was quite a surprise. And people were a little bit perturbed, as you might imagine, and understandably so. And I sat there thinking, no, something's odd about this, because one of the things you learn about in Panama is that people stick by the country. They really do join together when they feel the country's under any sort of outside attack of any kind, whether it's a political thing from overseas and something, or if it's, in this case, a virus. Until such time, at least, as they have made it very clear that they are united, that they have the thing moving in the direction they, as a group, want it to go. And then the second phase is when they're reminded, as they must be, that this is a democracy. And there is an opposition, and they keep an eye on things. And if they don't like something they see, they speak up. Now, they won't do that in the initial stages because they want to be part of the united front, and it's very early on. Now we're at a later stage. So when this happened, I thought to myself, this is what I would expect to hear when we were about to enter the next phase. And indeed, from my perspective at least, that's pretty much what happened the next day when some plan was announced, which had been in the preparation for some long period of time, in which I'm sure that everybody in the newspapers and the elite and everybody across the boards knew exactly what was going on, that this was being discussed. This was the actual announcement of it. And basically, every nation has to look to what's going to happen when things literally are over, when you release people from quarantine and they go out there and they don't find any jobs. Initially, you have to get reorganized for that. Some jobs will be immediately there, but others, will the businesses still be around and alive? And if they are they going to be able to bring people into the office yet? Are they set up for that now? Because the virus is still out there and so forth. There's a lot of steps that we have to go through when you open up an economy. But the most important thing is that people have hope that the whole thing's going to work out. And there's probably nothing more depressing than realizing that you've got all these bills to pay. Now, one of the biggest things I've noticed here in Panama is the upper class actually, it can take care of itself. It has money. Some of them have been terribly hit by this, but that's neither here nor there. They have the resources, they have the background, and so forth. The poor, we have programs for, and they have, they need it. They have to have it. There's no question about that. So that's taken care of. But the rapidly expanding, or it has been in the last couple of decades, the middle class in the country is the absolute core of this society and of its economy. And I might add, from what I see of it and what I've been working in these last 16 years, this is where the dynamism is. This is the dynamic thinking and the forward thinking. It hasn't got enough experience yet. It isn't provided with much support, but it's clearly found amongst middle-class people, in my experience, more so than many in the upper class who really think of themselves as being very modern and very forward-looking and actually sound like they're out of the 1970s or something, whatever. The key point is the middle class is important, very important, and it has grown immensely in the last couple decades here. And so you're here and you're still trying to figure out whether your middle-class job exists, whether your company still exists. Maybe it is literally yours. It may be your restaurant or something like that. And you got to pay a mortgage on the home. You've got a car loan. That's very common. You have a variety. You may have business loans to hire extra staff that you can no longer use, right? At least you can at the moment, to open up another location. You got all sorts of loans and things that people took out in very good faith and were handling well. I mean, we have a very good record here in the banking system of very little loan delinquency in comparison to many nations. And so everything was perfectly fine until, bam, this hits us. And no one's prepared for this. It's force majeure, as they say legally. It's beyond anybody's ability to have predicted what was going to happen and the extent it was going to happen at this time. So what do we do about that? And this can really, really make it very difficult for your average household to get up in the morning and get any enthusiasm together when they know they've got this hanging over their heads and they have bills to pay, and there's not enough income there. Maybe they can handle a month, but 2 months, after that, no. And then what are they going to do? Are they going to have new jobs and so on? So what has been done is that the banks sat down with the government, quite a large group of them. And remember, this is, as I say, a city-state, and the majority of the population lives here. Well, the bank headquarters in this country are located here. So everybody who is anybody in that system has offices right here in Panama City, as does, of course, the national government. They all sat down. Others, actors and people, piped up and added their 2 bits in, but it was primarily between the banks, the finance industry, and the government, and they came to an agreement, and that agreement was announced. Now, what it boils down to is that loans are not forgiven, but the loans have been put off. You're not going to have to pay these loans. It's a moratorium on loan payments. And it will last for 7 months, which is basically June through the end of December of this year. And it covers, I'm reading the list here, they have mortgages, residential loans, obviously, personal loans, small and medium enterprise loans, agricultural sector loans, commercial loans, transport sector loans, automobile loans, and credit cards. And basically, it boils down to is that you have to go into a bank and you have to sit down with them and say, this is my situation. I've lost my job, or my business is in terrible trouble. Here's the story. I cannot meet all these requirements. And all right, fair enough. And there's going to be a lot of that. Then into this program, they do not have to make payments over that 7-month period. But it's not as if they're not going to have to pay the money. They will. And yes, over that 7 months, interest will accrue. And that will have to be added on to the loan in January. Now, some people have said, oh, that's it's terrible. I mean, that's just going to make the loan even bigger down the road. The point is to give people an opportunity to catch their breath, so to speak. Give them a solid period of time where they do not have to have this staring them in the face. They will have gone in, they will have discussed it with the bank. The bank will have determined that indeed it is this whole emergency that has led to their situation, and really it's not that hard to determine. And they will have granted it. But when the time comes at the end, they will have to sit down and work out a new payment program as we near January. Now, any of a number of things can happen, and some of them, we have people who are quite intelligent people, and they may say, okay, I need that, but I do have some money. I'm willing to pay at least the interest so that isn't accumulating. Things of this sort. It can be worked out. But the whole emphasis here is to keep people, as they said, no one loses their home. No one loses their car. These are 2 vital elements, particularly in the city area, but everywhere. And cars are just as necessary in the rural area. You don't want the business closing down because it can't service the current loan. It never will. If it closes, that loan isn't going to ever get paid back. The point is, it's not as if you're saving money by forcing people to pay what they can't pay. You're just making a disaster worse. And to me, the most important thing is the psychological. It's the sense the middle class has, okay, we know the lower class is getting a number of benefits. They always have. That's good. We're in favor of that. We know maybe some of the rich people are losing money, but what about us? And how do we deal with this? And I got a family to raise, and these are families pretty much here. We still have a lot of married couples with children, so a predominant group. What do we do? What's in it for us, so to speak? I think this is, you can just give people money, but that is not a good way to do it at all. In this case, it does require people to sit down with a bank that has agreed to do this. They're behind it. They're being supported by the government, is backing them up. They will go through with this. And you still have to sit down, and you just can't, if you're making money on something else and you've made a fortune the last few months because you sell something that you could sell without fear, or maybe it's all overseas income or something of that sort, well, then you're going to have a hard time convincing the bank that this is a crisis for you. But again, the overwhelming majority of people aren't going to have any trouble at all describing their situation. And it may be that they'll have a review in 3 months or 6 months, and so on. Do it as they see fit. But here, the family and the bank is involved in a discussion. You've got the bank has got the support of the government. The government is concerned that the middle class be satisfied and happy with this. There's a reason here for everybody to work together, and they will do so. Whereas to just simply hand out money, and that's just not a very effective way of doing anything other than pump up the economy for a very short period of time. People spend a lot of money or whatever, or maybe they pay their bills for a month or two, but after that and so on, it helps. I believe it does, and we'll see how it works out. But we can be as critical. Expats tend to be always critical. Not all of them. I mean, we always have a little group who come from countries that have financial problems that Panama doesn't even dream of, thankfully. But in any event, and are super critical. And I say, just give us a chance here. The whole region, if you can find a country that's doing a better job of preparing for it, of dealing with it as we've run through it, and who are going to this extent to prepare for the opening, well, let me know about it. I mean, it's great. But I do keep up track of other countries and their plans too. And there's no competition at the moment because most countries can't afford to do that. I mean, let's face it, if your country depends on oil revenue, how much money are they going to loan you to try to put up a program like this for a country that may have 10 times the population? It's going to be hard. The canal, in the first quarter, the business was down very little. It was not very noticeable. Second quarter here, which will include much of this, the first quarter had March in it, which is not the best of all possible years. But the second quarter will be down. But people are still shipping. And oddly enough, the coronavirus saved us some money because of a very extended dry season. Much of our electric power is hydroelectric power. Water levels in the lakes were falling sharply. There was real concern that, the canal had to start changing the rules, so to speak. They raised the draft. A ship had to carry less freight coming through the canal because there was less water in the canal, and they didn't want any chance of that running aground or having any problem. And this is getting worse and worse, and people were very concerned. Well, as a result of this whole affair over the last couple of months, there's been a 25% reduction in the use of electricity. All those offices and all those businesses are not using electricity. And the result of that is much less of a demand on the hydroelectric power. In turn, less demand on the water. And now we do have the rainy season coming in and replenishing the lakes. Wow. So we missed a bullet there that we had really been concerned about. And it certainly doesn't justify all the other losses. But what I'm saying to you is that we've got it there. The canal is functioning. It just goes on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, like clockwork. And they're very much aware of people who have problems and so on. If they have coronavirus on the ship, it just goes through the canal and wish them well. They've done it very intelligently and very well. They've been very kind, too, in helping at least one cruise ship that was in terrible trouble. They had the sensitivity not to just make them go to the next port and the next port. These people have been wandering all around looking for somebody who at least could help them get themselves organized and onto the next location, and we did that. Panama did that. And I was very, very pleased with that, and they did it very well. So we've got our act together. Everybody knows it. It's not a secret. We're small, so we don't get as much notice as some. I gave you an article you could read in the last one, and by the way, I understand some of you may have gone to read it and then not gotten through to it, that the link didn't take you anywhere. Well, one of you wrote and told me, and I found out they had changed the link, and so I changed it, and it's fine, works fine now. And I'll go ahead and stick it in this one too, if I remember, into the description. It's no big deal, but I'm just letting you know that word is around that we've done well. And we have done also well with the rating agencies have come through and they've said, we go from a stable to a negative outlook and so on. That's normal. The point is that we've maintained, in the letter systems they have, their BBBs, their AAs, and so forth, we've maintained our investment grade status. We have not lost anything at all. Others are much less likely to have that kind of news. So everything's relative in this world. And if we can pull this next period off well, and we can get back into the swing of things, at least as well as other nations, if not better than others, we're going to be fine, relatively. We'll still have problems that we're going to have to deal with. Everybody is going to have those, so there is no heaven on earth. Now, what does that mean for you? And we talk about real estate here, and people say, why do you always talk about real estate? That's from maybe 5% of you who actually live here in Panama and have been watching these videos for a long time. It's because the overwhelming bulk of the people I'm talking to right now are thinking of coming down and living here. If you're going to live here, you're going to have to buy a house or rent a house or something, some property to live on. So that's why it's a critical issue for you. I know there are among you several who are coming down for that very purpose and are not down here because of the coronavirus and the lockdown. I know others who were aware that prior to all of this, we had a buyer's market here for properties, rentals and sales alone. The prices were greatly reduced due to a glut in some parts of the country, particularly. A whole variety of reasons, and which I've discussed in other videos and will discuss again at some point if it's relevant. The key point is that we're already there, and now, of course, there are people. I know there are people here who are very desperate to sell. They really got to sell. Well, I understand it, and I have a great deal of sympathy for them, and I know they need buyers to come down. So I have to think about them too, and I really. So I'm talking to both those who need to sell and those who need to buy or who are interested in that, or renting, and those who need to lease, to rent out, and perfectly happy to do that in many instances. It's a good market for that. It's not going to be the easiest for the people selling, and for those renting the properties, they hope to get more money. But if they get money and they're covering their costs and what have you, they're going to be very happy campers. So I would like to see you coming down, if that's your purpose, or just to come down and take a look and see whether you want to come back down and then do that. I don't care. It's a process that everyone goes through. And I want to see you have that opportunity to do it if you choose to do it here in Panama. But I'm going to tell you that don't think you're going to jump on a plane the first week of June and come shooting down here to look for properties. If you live down here, so you want to get back, yeah, that's a different story. But we're going to have to sort things out. Our airport will be ready to accept people and to send them. There's a lot of work going on for that very, very good reason right now. But other airports are going to have to likewise be prepared and ready, and everything has to be synchronized. A lot of stuff has to happen. And then we have to be comfortable that the people coming in have been checked. And they will, of course, be checked again when they arrive here. But we will be very, very sensitive to what happens to the statistics here in terms of the coronavirus. If we start going sky high again, I hate to think, So my attitude is, give everybody a week or two here to do this and see what happens. Maybe a little longer, depending on when you want to get down. If you're really in a rush, I understand, but hold off long enough to make sure that this is unfolding well and that it's going well and that you're not going to end up getting stuck down here, all right, for a second quarantine. That's what I would try to help you with and keep you aware of as I can from down here. So as soon as you can and as soon as it works out for you, and if you're in need to, please do. We'd love to have you. I almost forgot. I was going to show you a couple photos at the end of the video. I'd mentioned that in the description to this one. And I'd like to remember, I hope to do it every once in a while in the future. Ed from Missouri is one of those who came down to use the MetroMatch service, and he's joined us down here in Panama. He happens to be up in Missouri now because he got stuck up there in the coronavirus. We're hoping to see him back here in the not too distant future. He did a lot of photography here. He's a good photographer. And he left me with a whole batch of photos, basically, and said, Bob, if you want to use any of these, feel free. So I thought I wanted to at least share these couple with you because I think they're interesting. They're most interesting indeed. And they're of a container ship about to go through the Panama Canal and the tugboat that will help it get through. So in this first photo, you see the tugboat. They're pretty substantial little vehicles. They're not tiny by any stretch of the imagination. They're tough and they're powerful. And you can see behind it, though, that that ship that is helping along is a little bit larger than it is. And so here's our second photograph. Can you see it? It's the same thing from a different perspective, a lot further away. This is not one of the largest of the ships that go through the canal, the container ship here. We've had some absolutely gigantic ones, and the ones going through the expanded canal particularly are just awesome. It's hard to imagine them. You see them floating along, you think, my God, that's just almost unbelievable. And then there's this little boat down there, and it does a great work. It does great work. They all do. They're really fine, and they have it down to a science. But I thought you'd enjoy taking a look at that, and maybe I'll add some more for those of you who are strong enough to make it to the end of one of my videos, and you deserve something for that, if nothing else. Thanks.